back to the Quest for Success podcast. Thank you for tuning in once again. Today we're really excited because we have a friend of the show. Would have been 2019, just before COVID started. Jam and I were in Vegas for CES, the Consumer Electronics Show. And one of our mutual friends took us to visit today's guest, Ryan Taylor. And over the past few years, we've just become closer and closer. And last Christmas, Ryan's family came out and spent Christmas time with us, and it was a great time. We've just become super close. And Ryan is a man of who's lived 1,000 lives, and so we were really excited to get him on and talk through some of his story. So Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. Glad to be on the podcast. I've seen a couple of you guys' episodes already. Like what you guys are doing, like the direction. So thank you for allowing me to join.
Excellent. Thank you, Ryan. So this podcast is just a conversation between friends,
That's right.
So we just go. We don't really have a structure. We just go with the flow, and we invite you to be open and have a good chat with us.
Absolutely.
And so we like to start, this whole thing is about success. And so we want to start because success means something different to everyone. So we want to start on that point. For you, what does success mean?
Well, for me, success is something that has changed over time, the word for me. So I would say every year, I would say every decade that changes success, what our idea of success is. Sometimes I think success is put into a box that involves materialism, things like that. But I think overall, success more or less means, I think, what you can do for other people. The older I get and the more mature I get as a man, specifically with some of the things that I do, I feel like when you can help other people um, get to a level that they didn't think they could reach, that like you were help yourself, I think that is determined success for me. The older I get, when I was younger, I was in my teenage years, success was the Rolls Royce, the thing, things of that, the materialism. But the older I get and I see things, especially as family members start to get older and, especially myself during COVID, I lost a lot of family members. You start to realize certain things and think from a different perspective. So for me now, I would say success for me would be the ability to help people. The ability to make an impact on other people's lives as well is very important. And there's many different facets and ways that you can do that. Whether it be mentally, whether it be spiritually, whether it be physically, emotionally, there's just many different ways where, you can define that and where you can find success ultimately.
Yeah, I love that. And because one thing we've realized is not only does success mean something different to everyone, but it's also something that's super dynamic and super fluid and changes throughout your life. So I love that you touched on that point.
Absolutely.
So Ryan, talking about man with many talent, how do we know like you as a mate, right?
Yes.
But apart from that, can you do a bit of an introduction to who you are and what you do, just to start?
Absolutely. Would you guys like a summary? Would you guys like entire
just
novel?
a summary. Just a summary. We can go into deep. In later. Yeah.
Okay. Well, with me, I'm a man in many places. As a kid, I travel a lot. Unfortunately, my parents didn't make it as far as being together when I was younger. So I did travel all over the place. Through military things like that. Lived in so many different states. Probably went to about 10 or 15 elementary schools, a lot of different middle schools. So I experienced a lot of different people, a lot of different cultures as I did grow up, in America. So, I had I experienced being around, Native Americans. I experienced being around Mexican culture, many different cultures growing up. I was never really around just one culture. I experienced the South. I experienced the West Coast, and I'm originally from born in LA. But I lived in New Mexico. I lived in Montana. I've lived in Virginia, pretty much, all over the states, been all over the states growing up. So, and then subsequently got into the Navy right out of high school, 18 years old, got into the Navy and got out the Navy about 6 years later. When I was in the Navy, I was able to travel pretty much all over Southeast Asia, was able to visit Bahrain as well as in Manama, Bahrain. For a couple months at a time. I was fortunate when I was in the Navy. I was in command called VRC-30. And unlike most other sailors that were on the ship, we actually were not on the ship for majority of the deployment. We were typically on land. So if we were in Bahrain, or the ship was going to go to Bahrain, we'd be there for 2 or 3 months at a time. When the ship was in the ocean, getting ready to go to Hawaii, we'd be in Hawaii 2 or 3 months at a time. We'd be on Pearl Harbor 3 months at a time. So we were fortunate. I had some great experiences there. I actually was able to understand different cultures. Being in Korea for about a month, I lived in Japan for about 3 or 4 months. So I was able to experience their culture, and and nearly got chewed out by my chief driving on the opposite side of the road because I'm used to American driving. I think it's very similar to Australia, where you guys drive on the right side. Japan's the same way, and I almost got an accident. So yes, so I experienced that as well, the international driving differences. But Navy, then got out the Navy, moved to Vegas, and the rest is pretty much history.
All right. So what do you do at the moment?
At the moment, I'm a technical recruiter as well as a songwriter.
Wow.
Yep.
See, there's so much to unpack there.
Yes.
But I want to, go back. You were talking about in your early days, you moved around a lot, and
yes,
you got to see a lot of the country and also the world. I just want to know what sort of impact did that have on you? Just constantly moving and never really having like one solid place, always kind of moving around.
Well, for me, it was a gift and somewhat of a curse, but more of a gift, I would say. And the reason why I say it's a curse, because when you do move around a lot, it's hard to gain some kind of foundation as far as like family and I would say friends. You're constantly the new guy. I was constantly a new guy wherever I went, so I had to fit in to different cultures, and then also the reason why it was a gift for me, because I felt like I was able to really learn other cultures and that I may have been ignorant to before. I was able to learn these other cultures, and not just different countries per se, but also different cultures within America, because America, West Coast is completely different from the South. South is completely different from the East Coast. I mean, they have some similarities, but there's always differences based on regions. But having that experience and exposure to different cultures, I feel like helped mold me and shape me, and helped me be able to, I would say, conversate with anyone to an extent.
So, Ryan, take us a little bit further. Like, give us a bit of a background to your family as a little kid. What's a childhood like for you, and just take us to the beginning of the journey.
Okay,
please.
Well, I'll take you back. I'm the oldest of my mother. I'm the second oldest of my father. So for me, childhood was very interesting. We moved around a lot. I think the first 5 or 6 years of my life was in LA. I think unfortunate things happened with my mom and father, so I actually had to spread apart. We ended up moving to Virginia when I was about 7, but primarily for the most of my childhood, it was me, my younger brother Christopher, then my younger sister Robin, who actually went to Sri Lanka with us, and she's a traveling nurse. She's traveled the entire world. She's probably been in about 100 countries, so she's loved to travel. She's the nomadic one. She's very nomadic, but we grew up very interesting. We I would say very, very strict. Our childhood was very strict. But you know what? It helped mold us to who we are today. Based on the parenting that we experienced. But as far as childhood, I mean, I was an athlete. I liked football. Played football. Played basketball. Ran track. My life as a kid revolved around sports. So everything for me it was all related to sports. That's the most important thing for me. And I think later on I got into music, probably in my adolescence, teenage years. We kind of go through an emo phase when you're a teenager to some extent. The world's against you, this and that. You're in your room by yourself. And I just literally would write in my room for hours and hours and hours. I would freestyle for hours and hours and hours. And I kind of developed a love for that, in my teenage years. I wrote a lot when I was younger, like 9, 10 years old, but I took it really serious when I was about 13, 14 years old. I'd be in my room for hours and I would just freestyle and on the karaoke machine for hours. And that was pretty much my childhood. That, sports, video games, poetry. That's pretty much, and traveling was pretty much my, childhood.
It hasn't changed much, right?
Oh
Still the same.
Man, I feel like I was trained as a child for my adulthood. That's what it seems like.
Yeah. And I know that music has become a very important part of your life.
Absolutely.
Was there any inspiration, or what kind of got you into rapping
Yes,
and
yes.
music?
For me, I would say the biggest inspiration for me, I don't know if you guys familiar like with early 2000s hip hop, but I was always a big Nas fan. I was always a big Talib Kweli fan. And I would say the Nas versus Jay-Z beef was probably the changing point for me. Where for me, I was a casual like hip hop fan where I was just, okay, I listen to it every once in a while. But once that battle happened, I would literally be in Virginia. So I would say about 1 o'clock, 2 in the morning, knowing I got to go to school in the morning, and I would just listen to the radio. No one really listened to radio anymore. It was the radio. We had one of the radios, the battery operated ones, and
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
just listening all night. And I was like, yo, I love this. And then I would just start writing, and that was my inspiration for me.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
you talked a lot about sport as well. And I know even when you were out here, we played a game of basketball together, and I could tell how serious you were about sport. And so, what was sport for you back then? Was it like a way to connect with other people? Was it like what did it provide for you?
Well, it's interesting you say that because I honestly I really don't know how I got introduced to it. I mean, I've always been a football fan. I've always been a Raider fan for as long as I can remember. And I don't know. I feel like with sports, it's just a competitive nature in me as well. Because I'm a different person. Like I would, if I had to really, let me see, if I had to put it into an analogy, I would say it's the way you are when you have road rage and how you are when you get out the car. So when you're driving, a switch cuts on. Like you have to, it's like sports like a survival thing because even though it's not life or death, in 99.9% of scenarios, there's always when you have a competitive factor, I think it changes something in your psyche. You act a little bit different. And it's the
Yeah.
same with me with sports. Like when I play football or basketball, for me, it's like a switch goes off, where something changes in me, where I kind of just become this animal. Like I don't know, it's just different, and it's just for me. I feel like I just been trained that way because some of the coaches that I've had, some of the experiences that I've had, has been very very strict. It's been very challenging. Everyone is very competitive in nature. And some of the people I look up to, like a Kobe, as far as sports, certain athletes, they have that kind of mentality. And you kind of, when you're a kid, you kind of just look up to that and you emulate that. So that's kind of where I got that from.
So you said that you have that competitiveness in you,
Yes,
in your roots.
yes, yes.
Yeah. So talking about competitiveness, Ryan, I want to take you back to your music career,
Hmm.
right? So it's a very competitive business.
Yes,
What I want to know, what kind of music that you're, I mean, I know a little bit, but what kind of stuff that you write? Any particular things? And then, where you at with your music? What are the achievements that you've done? Like, please share a little bit detail into your music, uh,
absolutely. I'll be
career,
glad
please,
to. I'll be glad to. For me,
because I
music
know you are
now.
very passionate about this music. Yeah,
Yes, yes. I love music, man. And for me now, and it's interesting you brought that point of about competitive nature because
yeah,
for me, I felt like with my music for a long time, because hip hop is very competitive,
yeah,
at its roots, no pun intended, the roots. But what I will say is I let that get to me for a long time is being too competitive. There are times where I went to shows and instead of just enjoying the music, I was thinking as I watch another artist perform as a spectator, I think I could be better than him. I think I'm better than him. Instead of just listening to music, I feel like now that I've gotten older and more mature, now it's more about the expression as a human being than it is about me just being competitive. And when I write my music, I think I say in that particular parallel now, instead of thinking, oh, I'm better than that person, I'm better than that person, I think more or less, how can I impact people? How can I
yeah.
relate to people? And what have I gone through that everybody else has gone through? And that's what I think about my music now. I actually wrote a quick poem or a rhyme or whatever you want to call it for this particular podcast that matches with
Yes.
this podcast. So
Awesome.
I can't wait to hear. I
yes,
can't wait to hear.
yes,
Yeah, yeah,
You spoke, about in your definition of success having impact. Can you bring that back to your music? Like, what is it about music that you feel you can have an impact on other people?
Well, I feel like we live in a very negative world, and I might have missed some of the things you said, Dylan, because I know it was a little bit of a lag. And it's probably my end because my internet is very herky jerky. I'm just going to be honest. It's herky jerky. We've had complaints here. Video games. We had Madden tournaments where things have lag. So, but no, but no. Back to your question. As far as music, I would say the world being negative and also being able to provide a positive impact. Because I'll be honest, a lot earlier in my career, I tried to fit the mold of what people thought a rapper was. I rapped about things that I didn't experience myself. And I feel like that has changed now. I feel like a majority of my content matter is going to be something that I experience personally or someone that I know around me experience personally. So I feel like when you have the opportunity to do that, you're also a voice for people that cannot, that can't speak themselves or feel like they're unheard. So I feel like that's the opportunity for me with music to kind of fill that void for people that may feel that way.
Yeah, I really like that because I do agree. I think a lot of people who aren't listeners of rap, they see rap as very much, these gangsters who are trying to be someone that they're not, showing off all their bling and things like that.
Yes.
But the way that you describe rap,
Mm-hmm.
talking about experiences that you've had or experiences that other people have had and kind of using it as a way to relate to other people's experiences. I think that's a lot more wholesome.
Mm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a lot more real, man. I feel like that's one thing that everyone needs to get back to is just being real, just be yourself. Whatever you are, be who you are. If you're weird, be weird. If you're awkward, be awkward. If you're
Yeah.
a nerd, be a nerd. Most nerds become the bosses. So that's just
That's right. Yeah.
And
Being
it took a
authentic,
long time
right?
for me
Yeah.
to do that. There's things that I didn't like about myself, and I might have portrayed an image that wasn't necessarily, myself. So, I'm guilty of it as well. I'm not holier than thou. I admit, I made those mistakes and, went down the the wrong path myself. So, it's one thing where you have it's a moment, an epiphany thing where you think you're just sitting there to yourself. You're like, it's not who I am. I'd rather go a direction that represents me, and then also people that feel similar to me that feel like they can't be themselves, they have an opportunity to be themselves. So that's the direction I'm going with my music. I want to be as real as possible. I want to be as positive as possible. Life's not completely positive, but the negative aspects of life, if I do write that in my music, I want to make sure that I'm able to give them a silver lining as well. If I'm if I'm making anything that is negative.
Yeah, for sure. And you you are talking a lot about just being yourself, and I think having that humility to accept you were trying to be someone else, and now
Yes,
just embracing who you are and bringing, I
absolutely.
think having that humility is also a really powerful thing, and to accept that you're doing something different and having the humility to try and make a change about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Ryan, like, how I see it, music that you use as a tool, right? Like also as a friend. Like, when you're down, when you're having some emotions, you use that music
Yes.
to communicate to others, communicate with yourself. Like, do you see that way?
No, I do, and I'm glad you brought that point up because for me, a tool can be used in many different ways. A tool can be used for good; it can be used for evil. So, and I think a lot of artists sometimes forget about that. What the tool can be used for. Either you can be a Venus flytrap or you can be a blooming flower. So you can either devour or you can give life, and that's what music really is. Words are truly spells, and that's something that I believe in. What you speak can manifest, can happen, can be created. So I'm very careful what I rap now. I try to be careful what I say. In any aspect of life, not just music, but also in conversation. When I get angry, I try to be careful what I use as well, because there's times where I have been a loose cannon and I've said things that I really regret. So, and as they say, art imitates life. So for me, you know, what I write down is probably what I'm going to do later on. So I try to just be very careful what I do and realize that I want to use this tool to build and not to destroy.
Excellent.
I think that's really powerful, and I think it
There's
comes
that
back
lag
to
again.
communication.
There's my cheap internet.
It comes back to communication, right? uh, because
Mhm.
you're being really clear and thoughtful about what you're saying and how you're communicating it, it doesn't leave anything else to be like the people on the other end aren't thinking, oh, did he mean it this way? Did he mean it that way? Is he trying to be someone else? It's very clear and concise. And I think being able to do that is quite a good skill.
That's your superpower, that
Yeah.
what you have, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So Ryan, take us through like an example. Like, you use your superpower, this tool, music tool, that
Hmm.
you use in a special time, to communicate, to express your feelings. I mean, I have a couple of examples I've seen,
Yeah.
but yeah, if you have any special moment that you can share with us, that you use music to
Well,
express.
I remember a couple moments I'll never forget. It was one time, and Rookie's gonna kill me, but she wasn't mad at the moment. But I remember because I do a lot of content that's not necessarily what you would call mainstream. I mean, I have art like that as well, where it is more to the pop side. But I had a song called "Dear Politician" I did years ago, and I'll never forget this. And this is during the time where me and Rookie were just dating. And I remember I did this song, and it was a kind of revolutionary song. And I remember this girl literally came up to me uh, while the song was over, and literally came up to me and kissed me on the cheek. And then she just walked away. She said, "Thank you, I appreciate that." And I looked at Rookie, I was like, I didn't expect her to do that, but she did it. But then another time, I was not expecting it. And then another time, I remember, I'll never forget it. It was at Del Mar Fairgrounds, and we had a show in Del Mar Fairgrounds in San Diego. And I remember after I got off stage, and it was a pretty big event. And I remember this little kid came up to me, and it's the first time anyone ever asked me for an autograph. You know, to me
Wow.
that was pretty special. And he's like, he ran up to me. He was with his dad, little kid, man. He said, "Can I have your autograph?" And I gave him his autograph after I got in a performance. So I'll never forget that moment.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. I remember when you were in here in Sydney, like
Yeah.
Christmas time, in our Boxing Day Christmas party, Boxing Day party, you rapped and entertained all our guests, which was awesome. We thought
It's
that's a
still
special.
something we talk about
Yes.
to
That was a
this
great
day.
event.
So
Yeah.
it was amazing. But we've talked a little bit about music, but I think we skipped over a whole chapter, which was your time in the Navy. I want to go back to that period. What led you to join the Navy is first off.
Interesting. Oh, I got a story for you guys.
Yes, please.
Well, well, for me, it was interesting because I feel like the military influence was always around me. So it was something that I was so used to. And I was so involved around since I was a child because my father was in the Marines for 28 years. And like I told you guys before, previously, my mom and dad didn't work out. And then my mother got married to another military guy. So, you know, my whole entire life was pretty much military oriented. It was in that particular mindset. It was that mentality. Our house was typically very strict. Childhoods was a little bit different as far as what we could do and what we couldn't do. Very strict. There's no sleepovers with our house. There's none of that. We rarely had guests that weren't family at the house. It was a very interesting household. How we grew up. So just being, I would say, in that particular realm for my whole entire childhood, I think is what transitioned me. And I'll be honest, when I was 18,
Yeah.
I really didn't know what to do. Like I just, it was 18 years old, and my parents pretty much had philosophy is either college, if you want to stay with us, or you got to go to military. So we had to make a decision. So, right when I got out of high school, I pretty much, got my own little apartment for a little bit of time. And I got a story for you guys here.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have time, but this is
Sure.
We
We got
do.
plenty of time.
okay. This is before I got into the military. So me and my parents kind of got into a little spat before I got into the military. So I was supposed to go in 6 months from the time frame I got out of high school. So actually, I got out of high school in June of 2024, and I was supposed to go to the Navy in December 2024. Um, so in between that 6 months was a crazy time period. I'll just say that now. Um, During that time period, I actually had my own place. I had a roommate with me as well. I couldn't stay with my parents at the time. I just couldn't. It was so strict to the point where even when I was 18, it was still the same rules when I was 13, 14. So I had to get out.
Yeah.
So I remember when I was staying at my place, crazy story. I was getting out of work. I was working at McDonald's at the time. And I got out around 1 or 2 in the morning. I was working graveyard shift. And this is in Newport News, Virginia. So I was 18 years old at the time. It's one of those life-changing moments for me. When I got out of work, I was clearly tired. I had my own car. I was on top of the
Yeah.
world. I had an old school Camaro, 84, 85.
Nice.
And I was driving it like crazy at night. And for some reason, I just wasn't paying attention to the road. And for some reason, everything was a blur that particular night. And I remember I ran right into a ditch
Oh.
and totaled my car. And it gets crazier. I get back into my car, and I don't know how my car is still operating because the way I hit the ditch, like my hood was destroyed. The hood of
Yeah.
my car was destroyed. I had a huge cut in my face where like blood was coming out, a huge laceration. Also my forehead as well. And I just look, I'm like, oh man, what am I gonna do? I can't go to work now. And I literally get into my car and I don't know how it operates, but I cut it back on. It's still working. The engine, I think, is still on. So I don't even have to cut the car on. So I literally drive back to my apartment. And as before I get back to my apartment, I remember a car pulls up at an intersection, a stoplight, a red light. My car is like this. Keep in mind, the car is totaled. And there's 2 girls in the car next to me, right? They look at me, and I look at them, and keep in mind, there's blood all over my face. And I look back at them, and they just drive off like as fast as they can, as fast as they can. And I just say, I just keep going. I'm like, man, this day just got worse. And keep in mind, me and my parents at the time was not the best, as we are right now. So I'm driving to my apartment, and I remember I get to my apartment, and I park my car. I get out my car and go into my apartment. Look back to my car, and I'm just like, man, I'm sad. I'm like, this is my car. I literally paid. And it was a cheaper car. It had some issues.
Yeah.
It looked good, but it had issues. I got it for about $1,000. I'm 18-year-old. I'm like, hey, just give me what you got. It was like $1,200, $1,500 car at the time. And I get back into my apartment, and I remember my roommate, wakes up and he's like, are you still gonna be able to give me a ride to work tomorrow? Not knowing what happens, right? And I tell him the whole story, and he's like, towards the end of the story, I'm like, hey man, I got into an accident really bad. My face is messed up. I need stitches in my face. Like I have blood like coming out of my face. And I never forget, he said, so you can't give me a ride to work tomorrow? And it's dark in the apartment, so he doesn't know the magnitude of what just happened.
Yeah.
Until he wakes up the next morning, he walks outside, sees my car, walks in the house, is like, oh, I understand that. And I never forget, my mom picks me up. My mom picks me up the next day. I just go to sleep. I don't do anything. I go to sleep. And I probably should have went to the hospital that night. And I literally had, like, you could literally see the bone you can't see it now. The scar's still there, but you can see the bone from my jaw, and it was completely open. My mom picks me up. She's like, what the hell's going on? What are you doing? Like, and she proceeds to take me to the hospital. I got my stitches, and, the rest is history. But that's one of the stories that happened right before I went into the Navy. So it was just a lot
Oh,
going on
wow.
at the time. So I think I was going through a process there, a change process from, become a boy to a man. So, and I learned a lot in that time span.
So you went to Navy with stitches on your
Yes,
chin.
yes, yes. And I was a
Yeah.
different Ryan at the time. There was no mustache, no beard. I was clean face. I like you, Jim. I was clean face. So you saw everything. So it's a different time period.
And what was it like joining the Navy, being still a young man, and how did it shape you? Because I imagine it's a totally different lifestyle to what every other 18-year-old is living.
Wow, it was completely different for me, and it happened in a very quick time frame. And I had to learn and wake up really, really fast because there's a lot of things that, when you go to boot camp, if there's things that you're not solid or strong in, you will get exposed in boot camp, and they'll harp on those weaknesses that you do have, and they'll try to break you down. I feel like the whole element of boot camp is to bring you up or bring you down in order to bring you up. But I would say boot camp was a complete shocker. I mean, I don't know how graphic I can get on the quest to success, but you get into boot camp and it's not like being home. Your showers aren't going to be at the time frame you want them. You're in there. It's quick. 3-4 minutes is all you get. You get 3 minutes. It's a timer. They're timing you. And also, I don't know what the rating is of this
No,
podcast.
you can say whatever
G,
you want.
PG. You're sharing the shot with other men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to get used to that as well. You're sharing the shot with other men. You know, and there's a lot of older men that are going to make jokes that are more comfortable with that scenario than you as an 18-year-old, you know, being fresh. They're going to make jokes about it. There are things you're going to see in the bathroom that you probably shouldn't see. But that happens as well. And I don't know how deep you guys want me to get, but I see some interesting things in boot camp. I seen guys where they didn't want to be there. Clearly, they wanted to leave. They wanted to go home. I seen a guy literally go missing, but he really wasn't missing. He was in what we call barracks. That's our area where we sleep, where they train us to death to an extent, make us do push-ups forever, make us do all kind of bodybuilding exercises, burpees, things like that. But I remember one guy was in the corner in boot camp. I'll never forget it. And they're like, we can't find so-and-so. I can't remember his name. So we'll use Joe Schmo just for now. But I remember he was in the corner in boot camp, and he's literally sitting Indian cross style, his legs, right? And they're like, what are you doing? And he's literally just sitting there quiet, didn't say anything. And he defecated himself, essentially. Yeah, he just sat there, defecated on himself. And what we call RDCs in the Navy, it's called drill sergeants everywhere else, but we call them RDCs. But he was literally just sitting there, and I don't know if he did it on purpose, if it was intentional, or if he was really crazy. But he was gone a couple of days, and this kind of things you experience at boot camp. You know, some people don't want to be there anymore, so they'll pull any kind of, you know, any kind of thing they can, any kind of trick to get out of there. So that's one thing I experienced. But I would say the craziest things that I did experience from my first deployment, though, for sure.
And can you dive into a bit
Oh,
of those things that you saw in your first deployment?
Yeah, I was still 18. So a lot of things. I was fortunate though, because in most of Southeast Asia, most places you can go to, you can experience. You can be 18, you can experience it. I think the exclusion was Japan. I think Japan was either 19 or 20, where you couldn't go to a bar, you couldn't go into some clubs. But my first deployment, we went to. The first stop was Korea, so we stopped in Korea and Busan, Korea. We were actually on. I can't remember the name of the base. It was an Air Force base, though. Can't remember the name top of my head, but it wasn't either Busan or Osan. And I think our squadron, our detachment, we were assigned next to right in the same area as a U-2 plane, spy plane. I believe the U-2 spy plane. So we were there with them in Korea, and let's just say I experienced things I didn't think I would see. I saw in Korea when we went into town, just different things, different cultural things, the food. I had hair at the time, believe it or not. I had hair. So the barbershop as well. It was the first time I experienced the barbershops where they actually, you know, gave you your fade or whatever hair that you picked, but also followed it with massages. So, you know, they give you a back massage, things like that. They rub, you know, give you a massage and then move you on. And I've never experienced that before in the States. So I experienced that. There's other, I mean, I don't know what rating you guys trying to go, but there's other things I experienced too as an 18-year-old. Like it was very wild for me to experience that. I would say my favorite experience was Singapore. That's probably my favorite experience. My first deployment was definitely Singapore. The parties were extremely wild. And like I said, we were there 2 or 3 months at a time. So I got to understand the culture. I got to, you know, get friends there when I was there and experience people and actually go to their house. Because most sailors don't get that experience. They only get to a place for about 3 or 4 days when they get to port. But I was able to experience these places 2 or 3 months at a time. So, you know, it helped me understand different people, understand different cultures, I would say different religions, different practices, different creed, so many different things I was able to experience, different foods. It kind of, I would say, put me, you know, let me see things in a different perspective for sure.
Yeah. And so it sounds like it was more the ability to travel that the Navy really like left the impact on you.
Yes.
So it wasn't necessarily the things that you learnt throughout your Navy training or being on the ship or whatever. It was more the things you got to do outside of work.
Yes. I mean, you realize I'm 18 years old. Like if I joined the Navy now, it would be a completely different sailor. I'd probably be, with the way that I think now and how hard I work now compared to then, I would be a completely different sailor than I
Yeah.
was at the time because I was 18. And like I said, my household was very strict. I lived in a very militaristic
Yeah.
household. So for me, we were always traveling when I was a child also. So for me, traveling just became a part of my DNA, became second nature, to an extent. So, but I would say I had some great experiences as well in the Navy, work wise as well, because you're literally in a life or death scenario, and I think a lot of people forget about that, especially on aircraft carrier is one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. Being on top of aircraft carrier, you're about 5 or 10 feet away from F-18 jets, that
Wow.
are landing on the aircraft at 300-400 miles an hour. And the planes that we work on at the time, my first deployment, I did work in more in aviation. I was aviation administration, so I did a lot of maintenance for planes. So there's a lot of pressure there as well. So if I made a mistake on when a plane needed to be inspected, that was me.
Yeah.
That'll fall on me. So we had to determine flight hours. I had to calculate flight hours. When a plane needed a certain inspection, when it needed certain maintenance. So there was that aspect also. But also in the first deployment, when you're young in the Navy, when you're lower level enlisted, you have to do things, a lot of cleaning. You have to do a lot of mopping. You have to get people's coffee. So things like that. You had to learn. You really had to pay your dues in the Navy.
Yeah.
That's a lot of things I had to do. But example, like when I was on the flight line another time, the planes we work with were called C2A Greyhounds. So these Greyhounds were propeller planes. So we were towing these airplanes into certain designated spots on the top of carriers, which would then be, elevated down to the hangar bay. But these particular planes were propeller planes, and these propellers are going extremely fast. So if you get in contact with this propeller, you're getting decapitated, you're getting cut up. So you have to constantly think of your mind to pay attention. So, and that can be difficult in the Navy because when you're gone 6, 7, 8 months at a time, you're away from your family, you're away from your friends back home. It's easy for the mind to wander,
Yeah.
and it's easy for you not to pay attention. Propellers come and boom, you're gone. You're smithereens. So those are the things we have to think about, and also other things as well. Because like I said, previously, we stayed in particular countries for 2-3 months at a time. So just buckling your seatbelt the right way could be life or death when you're on one of these planes. Because
Mm-hmm.
what we have in the Navy is called a cat shot. It's a catapult shot. So you're being catapulted off the ship, and you're being catapulted about 100 to 200 miles an hour. So if you're not in your harness correctly and you snap out of your seatbelt, you're dead. Like you're gonna be flung into a wall at 100 miles an
Yeah.
hour. And that almost happened to me one time. I remember there was we had a guy by the name of Smokey in our and he's one of the air crew. He's one of those guys that troubleshoot the airplane. He's a technician on the airplane. And I remember one day I just wasn't paying attention. My mind was elsewhere, and half of my seatbelt was not incorrectly. And I remember right before we were lifting off, about a minute before liftoff, Smokey sees me. He looks at me. He's like, "Taylor, what the hell's going on?" And he had to snap me in. Like my mind wasn't there. Something happened. Like I had gotten a phone call. My mind wasn't there. Something had happened in the squadron with another sailor. My mind was not there at all. And he possibly saved my life because if I got flung, I would have died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's crazy. I
Yeah.
want to go back. You were talking about you had a very strict childhood coming from your family's a military background.
Mm-hmm.
Do you look back on that time with any bad feelings? And are you trying to be a different dad?
Absolutely. To answer your question, there are some bad feelings there, especially from, I would say, me, my younger brother, and my sister, because there's some things that we dealt with where our parents' mentality was a little bit different,
Yeah.
from where they were with my younger siblings, that are about 10, 15 years younger than us. There's a different mentality with our parents. There's more survival mode. There was a lot of trauma there, a lot of, I would say, healing that was required, um, that we had to deal with, during that time frame, from my mom and also my, stepdad as well. They both were remarried. So there's a lot of trauma there. There's a lot of things that we had to deal with, that weren't ideal, to an extent, a broken home. And then also, a blended family that we had as well. So there's a lot of things that we're dealing with there that we still deal with to this day. They're still difficult to this day with some of the family members, whether it be between me and my own father, some of my own siblings as well, that we still haven't completely recovered from. We try to ask for forgiveness, and forgive as much as we can, but that's still there as well because a lot of traumatic things happen in that time frame. But I'll say for the most part, we have all healed. Forgiving my parents, for anything that might have happened, because I wasn't perfect either. I was a problem child as well. So, I got in a lot of fights in school. Like I said, I was always a new guy. So I was always,
Mm-hmm.
defending myself and, wherever we were. So, for the most part, but I've forgiven them and I understood the reason why, they made certain decisions they made.
And is forgiveness the only way that you mended those relationships, or was there other things to it?
I would say, forgiveness is one, and the old adage is time heals all wounds. That's another thing. And then also when you're put in that predicament, when you're an adult as well, when you become a parent, when you're in a parental setting as well, you start seeing things a little bit differently, and you become a little bit more understanding of the things that you went through with your parents, and then also some of the decisions they made, the tough decisions, the executive decisions they had to make as
Yeah.
when you're a child in order to give you the best upbringing possible. So, I was able to understand and relate a little bit more, as I became a man myself.
Yeah. So, Ryan, good point that you made. Like, um, the those lessons that you learned, right? So, how do you apply to your current family? I mean, introduce your family. I know we know your family, but just a bit of a background to your like current situation, like your family and how you apply. Are you doing anything differently? Yeah, from all the lessons that you learned from your childhood.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, of course I'm married to Rookshi, as you guys all know, and then Monica's my daughter, but we also had two older sons as well. The Rookshi had from a previous relationship, and it kind of was full circle for me, with them being the same scenario as a child myself. So, there's some things that we went through as well, traumas that we went through that we're overcoming. You know, and they're boys becoming men. So I try to be the best example I could possibly be. Um, One thing that I wanted to do myself and inflict is to make sure there's a positive, role model there as
Okay.
well, and that we all can grow together. Because I understand what it's like to not have that. I understand what it's like to feel like a parent is missing from the equation. It can be very difficult. There's a time I didn't see my biological father for 10 years. So pretty much from age 9 to not again to 19. So I understood what that scenario is like, and how that can be. So, and how it could be to have a family, that is essentially, broken to an extent. So, just being as positive as I can be in that scenario, so we all could be strong together, and change the trajectory of our families for future generations.
And going back to your time in the Navy,
Mhm.
what caused you to leave?
For me, it was just a time. It was time for me, and the particular rate that I had, they wanted to change that rate. Rate in the Navy would be your job, your MOS, so your military occupation. So I was AZ. I worked aviation administration. I like what I was doing, but they wanted to move me to submarine, and I was not going to a submarine. So I was like, it's time for me to go. So, and then also I had other things that I wanted to pursue as well. So, like the music and just different things. Because when you're in the military, you're pretty much under their orders. You're under their direction. So I kind of want to just go my own direction and see what my path was. Because I feel like my whole entire life was military. It was all military, and I
Yeah.
kind of wanted to see what it would be like, going my own path, going my own route.
Yeah, yeah. So, talking about music again, like from Navy to music. So, while you're in Navy, do you, is there a correlation, like between music and Navy? And did you use much writing when you're at Navy?
Yes, I wrote a lot. I wrote very heavily. I remember I have a story back in boot camp, and this is one of my reality checks of when I got in the Navy. Um, certain, in boot camp, we had a certain curfew. So there's certain times in the day you couldn't do anything. You couldn't write mail to your family. You couldn't do anything. I think it was either 9 or 10 o'clock at night. But I had ideas in my head one night, and I had to write. I just had to write some music down. Like I had to write some. I had to write something. And I remember I left the notepad. You can't have any kind of articles in your what we call it was a rack. It's called a rack or a bed, and they were like bunk beds essentially. So you had one on the top, one on the bottom, and I had it under my pillow. And I remember my RDC or everyone else's drill sergeant. He came and I forgot to put it back into my compartment. And I remember he came one day and just destroyed everything. Like he came to my bed, he found it because they do inspections every morning to see what we have on us. And he literally, I don't know if someone snitched on me or someone told, or he was investigating at night, but he came in there, got everything, and literally just took my whole entire the pillows, everything, just destroyed it. Took my sheets, everything, took it apart, threw it on the ground. And anyone knows military, you have to crease your bed at 45-degree angle. So you don't just make your bed, you have to crease it at 45-degree angle on the tips. And I'll give you an example of that one day, but it's very intricate and it takes time. It's not just a fast thing. So he literally gets to my rack, destroys everything, gets the sheets, everything, tears them off, throws them on the ground. He's like, okay, Taylor, put it back together. He's like, oh, you writing, huh? So he punished me as well. He said, you writing mail? I was like, no, I'm not writing mail, I'm writing music. He said, it doesn't matter. Past 10 o'clock, you can't do anything. So he had me do like 1,000 burpees, like 100 something push-ups. And I paid for it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wonder what all of that music written down. We could have listened to it one day, but it's gone. Yeah.
So Ryan, so take us through a little bit more, because we talked about Navy and talked about music, but in terms of music, what are the achievements, like something that you're very proud of, apart from writing a lot of songs, and what's the probably most proud of achievement in music?
Well, for me, I would say one of my proudest achievements was, I would say, to start off would be my introduction to Gary Devon Dotson. He's, I would say, is one of my biggest partners. One of the reasons why I was able to get a lot of the exposure that I was able to get, and to this day, we're still friends, we're still partners to this day. But my relationship with him, he's an amazing composer, amazing drummer, an amazing producer. Me meeting him was able to get me opportunities, essentially. So meeting him was able to give me opportunities where I had my songs played on TV, on MTV, on VH1. I've had my songs played, during shows. I've had my songs played on different shows. I think Tiger had a show, Lil Wayne had a show where my song was played on. If you're familiar with VH1 Black Ink Crew, I've had some songs played on there, and that's directly because of him. In my relationship with him trusting me and believing in me is the reason why I was able to, get those accolades and be able to have those opportunities.
So if someone wants to listen to your music, is there a way that we can find it?
Yes, I have some music that are on streaming sites now, Spotify. Our label is actually going through some reconstruction things now, so some of the music has been removed. But I'm working on a lot of music and getting those songs remastered, and they're going to be re-released soon. So I'll keep the details with you guys and make sure you guys have that information. So it is when it is released, and that will happen very soon.
Oh, awesome! Yeah. Looking forward to listen to them.
Absolutely.
Also on the music note, you said early on that you had a poem or a little rap written for us. We would love to hear it, Ryan.
Perfect. Well, I do have. It is called Quest for Success. So, all right. So, are you guys ready out there for this one? All right, here we go. Quest for success on the right path to runner. Went through many battles trying to capture my nirvana. Got to remove the distraction from my encounters. Still trying to share my soul. That'd be the greatest badge of honor. You can vagabond like a meteor or comet to find your success, but I promise if there's a self-love, success will not be conquered. Success will not be conquered. Formulate ideas, let my mind ponder. Understand words have infinite timeless power to devour like a Venus flytrap or feed like a beautiful flower. Life hack can be firewall, realize that. Words have meanings. I soar like a cataract or eye patch, or I soar like a pterodactyl through a cloud patch. My floor can be your roof, and my roof can be your floor. Success is determined by a personal gaze, and only you can define that. quest for success.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
right. That
awesome.
was that was so good.
This is gonna be our theme song. The Quest for Success podcast. Yeah.
I suppose, is there any regrets that you have looking back on your journey?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Regret is a good word. They always say you shouldn't regret. But I would say one thing I do regret is not being myself. I would say earlier,
Hmm.
not being myself, not trusting myself is probably one of my regrets. I would say procrastination is another regret. Any procrastinating I did have, any self doubt would definitely be a regret of mine.
And is there anything that you would tell your younger self?
How young?
Let's say teenage, just before you're about to kind of go into the Navy, you're you're having these little arguments with your parents, you're not really sure where you want to go. What would you tell that, Ryan?
I would say I would tell my younger self to be more communicative.
Mm.
I would say be more communicative, be more real, be more open. And then I would also say just because at that time frame, it's really hard to have great deductive reasoning. I would say as a kid, so I would say be more communicative.
Yeah,
Try not to
I
be
think that's
scared
Yeah.
because no one can read your mind.
that's very true. You got to share what's going on inside your mind so others can help you achieve what you want to do.
Absolutely, no matter the hurdle. That's also I think that's the problem with me. The hurdle. I knew my parents were strict, and I think that's what scared me.
Mm. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And I suppose like the last kind of part of your journey is tech recruiting. How do
Yes.
you go from this post Navy music career
Yeah.
into tech recruiting?
That actually happened, interestingly enough, by a guy that your dad has met. That
Oh,
actually
right.
happened. I actually got into it through Ralphie. I had got out of audio engineering school. I graduated from college, audio production, and then I was trying to find a job. At the time it was very difficult. I didn't really have anything lined up at the time, and it's very anyone that knows audio engineering jobs or audio based jobs is very unpredictable. So I wanted something that was more stable, and DJ Rafiki actually helped me out.
I met
Yes,
him. Yeah. Yeah.
yes,
In
yeah,
Vegas. Yeah.
yeah. Jam met him there, so we all had a good time that night. By the way, but he's the one that introduced me to a man by the name of Craig Kurtzman. One of the coolest guys that I ever met, and this man changed my life. It helped change my life, and from there I got to recruiting through him. And I remember I had interviewed with that company twice. The first time I interviewed, one of the managers, recruiting managers, was like, "Nah, we're going to pass on you." And then I guess Craig Kurtzman got wind of that. He's like, "You know what? Let me get this guy a shot." And he gave me a shot, and the rest is history. He brought me on the team, and ever since then I've been able to excel. You can't. It's hard to excel, without a team. Teamwork does make the dream work, and people have to take an opportunity on you and take a chance on you. And Craig did that. And, from there, I've been able to get a lot of different experiences with technical recruiting, with talent acquisition, with job coaching as well. With recruiting, I've been able to help people with resumes. It's one of my
Mm.
specialties is helping with resumes. I revise resumes. I do mock interviews. I make sure people are at a certain standard, before they speak to certain, companies. And I've done that with, civilians. I've done that with veterans as well, and those getting out the military. So I've been able to do that with Microsoft, been able to do that with Google. I've been able to do that with Apple. So, I've had some really good experiences there, and life-changing experience to say the least.
That's amazing.
Yep.
And to kind of wrap this whole conversation up, looking back on this entire amazing journey that we've spoken about, do you feel successful?
That's a good question. I feel I have a long way to go. I feel I have a long way to go. I think the success that I have will be in terms of my growth,
Mm.
but I feel like there's a lot of things that I still need to overcome. A lot of hurdles, a lot of challenges, a lot of temptations, a lot of distractions I still need to overcome in order to really be successful, to really be a man, to
Yeah.
really be the best I can be for my family, um, in the future, because they are a reflection of us at the
Yeah.
end of the day. So it is a mirror. So I have to make sure all the pieces of that mirror, that glass, is together. Every puzzle piece is put together before, I can say that I'm a complete success. I'm successful in the sense of I've been able to provide things for my daughter, and I've been able to show her things that I may not have been exposed to as a child. So I would say in that element I am, but there's also elements where I've not been successful, so that I definitely need to work on.
And what are those hurdles that you was talking about?
Man, you know what city we live in?
Tell us. Yeah,
Man,
especially live in Vegas.
it's a lot. It truly is, lost. We call it lost to wages, Nevada, but the hurdle was there. The lights, the lights, it could be very blinding. And when you're stuck on those lights for too long, you become a moth, so over time, I just had to realize what's important and what's not. So I would say, there was issues that I had in the past as well, being in Vegas, with gambling. So that did become a problem. That's becoming a widespread problem, for, everyone. So especially with everything being online now, gambling being online, that's become an issue, not just in Vegas, but across the board, all over America, and even I did my research in Australia as well, with bookies and things like that. So, that's one thing that I've had to work on. Has been extremely difficult, and it's been something that it destroys people. It can destroy you once there's a line you cross where it's very difficult to return from.
Yeah, for sure. So I just want to recap some of my takeaways from our conversation and the things which I think have put you in a good position to build your successful life. So I think the first one is, we've heard it many times throughout the conversation, is being yourself. And I think that ties into, you are clearly a very self-reflective person. You can take a step back and see, okay, I'm doing something wrong. You can accept that, and you're trying to make a change towards the more positive outcome. And so I think being yourself is being authentic. And it's something that we've heard throughout so many of our conversations with people.
Absolutely.
Is authenticity is really one of the key drivers. And then I think the next one is, we touched on it earlier, communication, and being very clear and thinking deeply before you communicate.
Yes.
There's that old saying, think twice before you open your mouth. And I think you're a great example of that. And then the next one is forgiveness. I think for many people, it would be very easy to kind of hold on to childhood trauma and resent for parents and resent for things not turning out the right way. Oh, I wish I had have just had one place where I could have settled down, and resenting your family for that. But just having the ability to forgive and move on, I think is something really powerful. And then the last one is maybe not even throughout this conversation, but I think because we know you well, you're a very down to earth and humble guy. You are. I suppose that kind of relates to the first point. You are who you are, and
Yes.
you don't try and make your achievements bigger than they are, or sell yourself differently. You're very genuine, and so we really appreciate that. And for you coming on and sharing your
Absolutely.
story, I know sometimes it's not an easy thing to do, to share your story with a bunch of other strangers, but we really appreciate all your time and for you opening up.
Yeah, just to add to that, Ryan, that vulnerability, that's another, adding to that authenticity, being vulnerable. Ryan is always very open guy. He's not trying to pretend that someone else. Like, he's very open. He talked about some challenges that he's going through, so that being open and being vulnerable, it's an asset. People think that's a weakness. Absolutely not. you know uh, you can connect with others when you're vulnerable, and people can help you, right? So that's something that come across. And you're quite emotional person as well, something that I've noticed. And I think when you're creativity and emotions are going together hand in hand, right?
High
So
emotional intelligence,
yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
And yeah, I mean, Thank you, Ryan. It was really a joy to have this chat.
Likewise.
I know
Likewise.
it's Saturday afternoon for you, taking time off and having chat while your family is busy in the background.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us and share your story. And
once your Spotify and all your music is ready to be pushed out to the world, for people listening later on, the link will be down in the show notes. And also, if you haven't already, give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and make sure you're following us as well at the Quest for Success Pod. And on that note, we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks for having me.